women shouldn't be drafted. The purpose of war is to protect women and children. Is that correct?
That's what I said, yeah.
You don't think the purpose of war... Here, let me hear your argument. So you said the purpose of war is to protect women and children.
Yeah.
Okay, how? Why?
War occurs because men are trying to get more territory. Correct?
So that's the purpose of war.
Well, they want to get more territory, more women, more better access to women. That's basically what...
That's why people go to war? No, I don't think...
Why do you think they go to war?
I mean, I agree somewhat with your first one, which is, it could be territorial dispute.
Killer of Serial donated $100. Isn't the end goal to climax? That's a solely transactional relationship. Regardless of how deep conversations get, the chemistry you feel is always left with cash in hand. That's not true connection.
Killer of cereal. Which cereal are you killing, dude? Are you a Frosted Flakes type of person? Are you a Fruit Pebbles? Is that a fuck? I haven't eaten.
I feel like this was a throwback to the earlier serial killer comment.
Ah, I see. Okay. Was it directed? Isn't that gold? Okay. Purpose of war.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
You were explaining?
It's to get access to women.
The purpose of war is to get access to...
Why do men want anything? Why do men want money? Why do men want land? They want it for their children and their wife.
No, that's not true. That's, it's half true, but it's not true. For men, status among other men is also highly important. It's not always just to attract a mate.
Status among other men?
Men, unlike women, will accept power for just power's sake, without wanting to attract a mate at all.
Do you think that's like the most popular, like the generally the majority of men want power just for power?
Well, the majority of men don't start wars. The majority of men just fight them. So if you're talking about the lower echelon of soldiers who are fighting for king and country, sure, they can be propagandized into believing that's to save their holdings and their families and their wives and their children. But if you look at the hierarchical power structure, no. I think that power for the sake of power for elitists is just as much of a motivation as attracting a mate. I don't think they give a shit.
Why do these men follow and just do what they're told?
Well, I just told you through propaganda. So it's easy. It's
why
easy
does this
to
propaganda
utilize.
work on them?
Yeah, but I already explained the echelon threshold. So I think that draftees and lower form soldiers can be propagandized into believing that they are.
I'm asking a psychological question.
No, your question is why do the men follow the orders? So in the case of if they're already in the military or if they're drafted, if they don't follow orders, they get court-martialed and they get sent to a military prison or they get killed.
Okay,
That's why they follow orders.
I'm not saying that it's not, it's sad. I'm not saying that it's like not awful, that war isn't terrible.
Okay.
That all the men that die in war isn't terrible.
What's the psychological question?
I'm making a kind of a larger point, and I can't get that because I get sort of...
I can't hear you very well.
I'm trying to make a larger point, but I keep getting kind of sidetracked a little bit with little side quests,
okay, just go ahead,
related.
Go ahead. Make your point.
Okay. So the question is, so I asked, do the majority of men, like if you took a survey of men, do you want to go to war for like power or for like to protect women and children? Like why would...
Well, so in this case, would you agree with me that most men who go to war are very young and so do not have families? Would you agree that that's true?
I don't know the data on that.
Yeah, but let's assume for a second they're very young, so they probably don't.
Okay.
Yeah, so if that is true, that most wars are fought by young men without families, then they're not protecting their families, right? So they must have some alternative motivation. What would you think that might be?
To have family in the future?
Right, so it's for status, right?
I guess status is appealing to women.
Yeah, status. It's for status, it could be for money, it could be for patriotism, this and that. The primary motivation is not always to attract a mate, though. That's my point.
I agree that some men just want power for power's sake, sure.
Yeah,
I
but I'm
think-
talking about now the lower echelon in the hierarchy. I think that
Okay.
also they are not fighting wars specifically to secure women, but
I
because
think-
it also brings money and it brings status, and men do like status.
Yes, they do like status. Women like status from men.
They like it from men, that's true, but men also like status from other men.
Why?
Right.
Why do they want status from other men?
It's just it's part of how
It's a
we're
game.
built as a hierarchy.
What do they-
If we didn't have status appeal, there would be no hierarchy.
Because we love hierarchy so much. The man that gets to the highest hierarchy of all men, what does he get?
He gets whatever
Switch
the fuck
the
he
split.
wants.
Exactly. So he gets his best choice of the women. He gets
No,
the most
no.
virtuous
Now you're
women.
conflating two different things because you're ascribing his motivation to the best pick of women, but I'm saying that his motivation could be power for power's sake.
I'm not disagreeing with you.
Nietzsche wrote on this extensively, in fact, and I would have to disagree with you and say that their only motivation for power is to attract women. I think that if you're a man who is even on the path to the highest of the hierarchy, you have your pick of women anyway.
Okay.
Wait, so okay, you disagree about women. You said women shouldn't be drafted.
No, I don't think women should be drafted.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
I think women should be drafted.
I think women should be drafted. I'm sorry, I do not want a woman on the front lines trying to protect the United States of America.
I'm pretty
Well,
sure
let
there's
me-
like stats
let me give you
on it.
From
This
from a
scenario.
physiological perspective.
Well,
we will
okay.
lose.
So let's say that the women are 20% less effective than the men. Well, couldn't you say that the army that's willing to send out the women, that's like some meat shield shit. Maybe you
No.
kill a few guys,
Oh my
and then we
gosh.
come in, the dudes come in,
No.
and we take
You're
care of
just-
the rest.
Men,
Brian,
men are more
no.
disposable than women.
No.
I mean, I'm arguing a little bit humorously here, but it occurs to me from just a purely egalitarian position, and that's kind of what feminists demand in almost every single other realm. From a purely egalitarian position, from an equality position, you should probably be drafted.
From a feminist equality perspective, yeah.
Also, let
but
me
I'm
just
not a feminist.
let's argue this. Let's say, for example, let me ask you this. So, let's say we remain slightly sexist and we say, well, we're still going to draft women, but we'll preclude them. We'll protect them from these frontline duties, and they'll only have support roles. We'll only draft them into support roles. What
like
about
nurses, galley, stuff like that?
Nurses, maybe they can be like in a mortar squad, so they're kind of in the back, but they could still maybe die.
I
What
think
about
the
that?
feminists will still have a problem with that.
Probably.
Wait, the
I think-
feminist will have a problem with.
Yeah, because you're
Well,
only going
it's
to put us in
preferable
some,
to not the
Yeah,
so
put
you're
us in
saying the
some-
feminist position is women should just be drafted? Is that the feminist position?
And they would say
It's
that
not clear
no,
to me if it
that,
is, but-
they would
I
say
think
no to that.
that there's a double standard.
If a
Yes,
woman can
it
do
is.
it better, then a woman should do it. If a man can do it better, then a man should do it.
Well, a woman
What if
won't be
men
able to do
vote
it better.
Oh,
Men do vote better.
True.
Should we? All right. So
Oh, now I know where you're going with this.
look, I think women should vote, but should we? Oh my God, I don't want to get canceled. Hold on, I don't know if I want to go there.
Well, if you were to hypothetically say that women were better at a thing, and men were better at things than women, if you did think that something like a pattern, let's say, for instance, of voting, was better done by men than women, would you prefer then that women be excluded from this activity?
Wow, that's a good framing.
That was a really good way to frame that.
I'm really sorry, but I need you to repeat that one. I'm sorry. I just had, I didn't understand.
Okay, so
that.
let me try it again.
Thank you.
So, if you were to believe, as you do, that men are better at certain activities than women, and women are better at certain activities than men, that's what you just previously stated. I have that correct, right?
Correct, definitely.
Okay. Then, if men were, let's say, better at voting than women were, would you necessarily exclude women from that activity because men were better at it?
But
yes,
that's
I would exclude
subjective.
them. If men are better at voting, then women should be excluded from voting.
How do
Got
we
it.
how do we know like one's
Based,
better
kind
than
of.
the other?
The reason that he says that is
Kind
because there is a map, and statistically men are voting in a better trajectory than women are, especially post-feminism, that women are voting in ways that aren't necessarily benefiting our country, but that's also because women are more emotional. So yes, women are better at certain things than men, like being nurturers. Men are way more analytical thinking, more geopolitical, smarter thinking in certain ways than women are. So that's why he's bringing up that question, because if you look at a map, men are voting in a trajectory that will benefit the countries more than necessarily in a more emotional viewpoint of that.
Question.
Well, men will vote for risk,
Right.
and women vote for security. So if the question really comes down to freedom or how much autonomy you want people to have, then if you want the maximum amount of autonomy, if you were looking at this objectively, you would push it over to men, because men will take risk, and risk will give you the highest amount of autonomy. Women tend to vote for security, and they tend to vote for basically more security for them, right? Let's put it that way. So you're going to see more of a welfare state. You're going to see more things, social safety nets. You're going to see more things like this, whereas men are more likely to take risk when it comes to how they vote.
And
Why are they
Andrew,
so afraid
hold
to
on.
get cancelled all the time?
Wait, Andrew, I've got a question for you.
Ryan?
I've got a question for you, Andrew. So, if it's copacetic, and I actually don't really object to a woman saying that women shouldn't be drafted, because that's obviously in their best interest. It makes sense. But if it's copacetic for a woman to say that statement, then shouldn't it in turn also be copacetic for a man to say, again, I'm not advocating for it, but for a man to say that women shouldn't vote? Because it occurs to me that if women can
With greater duty comes greater responsibility. It's very simple. So if you have a greater duty to the state, this in turn means you have a greater responsibility to the state, which means you should get greater reward from the state. What happens in this instance is that women have a lesser duty, but they get the same reward. That's bullshit.
and it almost seems like, I mean, this is going to be a hot take here, but saying that women shouldn't be drafted necessarily means that men should be drafted. Because I mean, we can have.
Well, it doesn't necessarily mean that men should be drafted, but it does mean that if you were to have press service, it's going to only be men.
Right.
So it's almost a distinction with no merit, right?
Let me make one more point. So,
Sure.
if that is the sort of de facto position, then if women shouldn't be drafted, then it must be men. Well, that seems almost more sexist to say that men are disposable, send them into the war machine so they can go and die, versus women shouldn't be allowed to put a check mark on a piece of paper and participate in an election. I think it seems worse to go and die in a trench somewhere than to not be able to participate in the electoral process. That's just me. Okay. I don't know.
But
Right, so what you're saying is that if you have to take a higher risk to the state, then you should get a greater reward. Perhaps that reward could be voting, or perhaps that reward could be something else besides that. But this is why I love the movie, for instance, Starship Troopers. I told you this, right? Service guarantees citizenship. So that would just mean, like, look, if this is something in which maybe you could do something like this. This might be a good in-between. You could say, look, if you're willing to give 6 years of your life to the state for free, you have no compensation whatsoever, then you can vote. And what you'd see is that the trend would still be that mostly it would just be men who were allowed to vote.
Okay.
There would still be some women,
I have a
but
question,
then at least wouldn't that meet the egalitarian standard?
Go ahead.
So following that logic, though, that would mean that participants of the military would be eligible to vote, not just the general public.
No, that would just mean that people who gave service to the state in one capacity or the other for free for X amount of time would be able to vote.
I don't think anyone should be forced to do anything they don't want to do.
Which would include men and women, or solely just
You could include, but if you could include men and women. It's just that the side effect of this would be that it would be way more men who
That's
would
reasonable.
sacrifice their time
That's reasonable.
without compensation in order to be able to be one of these special electors.
Did you have something? And then
Yeah, I just
I'll
don't
move
think-
on a bit.
I don't think anyone should be forced to do something they don't want to do. I think if we were in a better society, and I think if people were more patriotic, men would actually want to go and protect their family and children. But I think
Well,
Sorry, so-
you don't really believe, though, that people shouldn't be forced to do things that they don't want to do. I mean, obviously, people are forced to do things they don't want to do all the time,
obviously
right? And
there
that's
should
perfectly
be
acceptable.
guidelines, and you shouldn't murder people. You shouldn't. You shouldn't rob people. You shouldn't.
No. What about, should you stop at a stop sign?
Look, if you don't want to
Wait.
stop at a stop sign, then you're going to get hit by a car. But
No, that's not what I asked. Should you stop at a stop sign?
yes, you should stop at a stop sign.
You should stop at a stop sign, but aren't you forcing somebody who doesn't want to stop at a stop sign to do
No,
something
I'm
they
not.
don't want to do?
I'm not.
The
I'm not forcing
the
them.
government.
Yeah.
You know, well, wait, you are. You're imposing
No,
that if
I'm
you
not
don't do this
imposing
thing,
anything.
there's
I'm
going to be a
saying
penalty.
I would recommend stopping at a stop sign because we have rules like stop or you get hit by a car. But I'm
No,
not taking away
no.
someone's
That's not what you just
individual-
said. You just said they should stop at a stop sign, right? You're saying then that what you would make it is what free association? You can stop at a stop sign if you want to?
What?
Doesn't that seem
Yes, if
absurd to you? Like if you just feel like it, you can?
That's how people go through life. Like they have willpower and they just like, oh, I want to do this. I feel like I'm doing that. I'm going to do this. That's
Nick,
Yeah, I
you
know,
opened
but
the
if
door.
you
People make
impose penalties
decisions.
for bad behavior, they do bad behavior less.
yeah, that's true.
So you want people
That's
to
exactly-
stop at stop
thank you,
signs more,
Peppa Silva.
then what you would do is you would impose a law that said if you don't stop at a stop sign, there's some sort of fine or something like that, right?
Brian, how does this
Yeah.
have to do anything with dating? That's what was one of the comments.
Well, because you're testing the logic. We are talking in a broad sense about relationships, but people can come to views on relationships through other means, and it's important to test their logic on that.
That was crazy.
Yeah.
That
I mean,
Yeah, I
as a
think women
should
relationship
be- I
coach,
think women should
I
be
believe I'm
drafted.
talking to a relationship coach whose worldview informs her on relationships. And would I be wrong?